So this happened back in 2007, when I was about 16. I grew up in a quiet little town in Maine, the sort of place where everyone knows everyone, and the only excitement we got was when the high school football team made it to regionals. Halloween was always a big deal in our town. Pumpkin carving contests, haunted hayrides, all that. But that year, there was one house nobody went near. It sat at the end of Hill Lane, a half-collapsed old farmhouse everyone called the Wyatt place. The story was that old man Wyatt had gone nuts one Halloween night in the 80s and vanished after his wife and son were found dead in the barn. No one ever moved in after that, not even squatters. Anyway, that Halloween, my friends, Corey, James, and I, decided we were too old for trick-or-treating but too broke for the party at the quarry. So Corey got this great idea. He said we should carve a pumpkin and leave it on the porch of the Wyatt place, then take a photo to prove we did it. Halloween challenge, he called it. We biked there after dark, just the three of us and the one pumpkin we'd picked up from the grocery store. The road was foggy as hell, and the whole area smelled like wet leaves and rot. When we reached the Wyatt place, every window was black, but the front door was hanging open like a mouth. I remember saying, "We'll just leave it and go." But Corey wanted to put the pumpkin inside, said it'd make a better story. So we crept in. The house smelled like damp wood and something sour like spoiled milk. Wallpaper peeled off the walls in long curling strips. We set the pumpkin on an old table near the stairs, and I started carving by phone light. Nothing fancy, just 2 triangle eyes and a jagged mouth. But when I went to scoop out the guts, I swear they were warm, like the pumpkin had been sitting near a fire. That's when James said, "Do you hear that?" Somewhere upstairs we heard faint footsteps, slow, dragging, like someone walking barefoot over dust. We froze. I killed my phone light. Corey whispered, "Raccoon?" But the sound wasn't random. It was rhythmic. Step, scrape, step, scrape. James bolted for the door, but when he pulled it open, the fog outside was so thick we couldn't see the bikes anymore. And then something heavy creaked on the staircase. A figure started coming down. Not fast, just steady. All we could make out was the silhouette of a man, tall, shoulders hunched, carrying something. I thought it was a lantern at first, but then I saw it was another pumpkin. Its face wasn't carved like ours, it was smooth and dark. But as he descended, faint orange light began to glow from inside it, and I realized there wasn't a candle in there. It was glowing from within. Corey whispered, "Mr. Wyatt?" The man stopped halfway down the stairs, and the light flickered like it was pulsing with his breath. Then he spoke, voice dry and cracked. "Who carved that one?" We just stared. He pointed a shaking finger at our pumpkin on the table, and I swear, for half a second, its carved mouth twisted, the grin curling upward on its own. James screamed and bolted. Corey and I followed, crashing through the front door and running blind through the fog until we found the road again. We didn't stop until we reached the old gas station by Main Street. When we caught our breath, I looked around, and Corey wasn't holding the pumpkin anymore. He said he'd left it in the house. We agreed to never talk about it again, told James's mom we'd just gone too far into the woods and got spooked. The next morning, though, we went back. Daylight made it seem almost normal. The door was shut, no footprints, no pumpkin on the porch, no pumpkin inside. Just one thing sitting in the middle of the road where we'd run from the house. Our pumpkin, smashed open, seeds spilled across the asphalt. And inside the pulp I saw something small and shriveled. Looked like a dried-out human eye. Years later, when the county finally demolished the Wyatt place, they found a bricked-up cellar under the stairs. Inside were dozens of rotten pumpkins, each one carved differently, each one with something human sealed inside it. The official report said they were old, decades old. But one of them, according to the foreman, was still fresh. And carved into its surface in jagged letters were 3 names: James, Corey, and mine. So this happened a few years ago when I was still in college. I was renting this tiny off-campus apartment with my best friend, Amber. We were both broke as hell, so our place was, let's just say, vintage. The kind of place where the heat only worked if you kicked the radiator and the walls were thin enough to hear our neighbor's cat coughing. Anyway, it was late October, and everyone in our building was throwing Halloween parties that weekend. We didn't have the money for one, so we decided to do a horror movie marathon instead. Amber loved that supernatural stuff: Bloody Mary, the Candyman, mirrors and ghosts, all that creepy folklore. Halfway through our second movie, she got this dumb idea. She said,
"Let's play the reflection game."
Now, I'd never heard of that before, so she explained. According to her, it was an old sleepover ritual, something kids used to do in the 90s before the Bloody Mary craze took over. The idea was simple. You sit in front of a mirror at midnight, light a single candle, and whisper your name backward 3 times. Supposedly, your reflection starts to move slightly out of sync, like it's lagging behind you. And if you keep eye contact long enough, it starts smiling on its own. I told her absolutely not. Amber just laughed and said, "You believe in that stuff more than I do." Then she grabbed a candle, turned off the lights, and sat in front of the mirror anyway. At first it was funny. She was whispering her name backward and giggling, trying to sound spooky. But about 30 seconds in, I noticed the candle flicker, not from a breeze, just this sudden twitch. Amber's giggling stopped. Her reflection was still smiling. I thought maybe she was holding the pose as a joke, but then she turned to me, her real face, dead serious. Her reflection didn't move. It was still staring forward, smiling. I remember my stomach just dropping. Amber whispered,
"Do you see it too?"
I didn't answer. I was too scared to even breathe. The reflection tilted its head slightly, like it was listening to us. Then the candle went out. Everything went black for a second, pitch black. When I turned on my phone's flashlight, the mirror was fogged over. There were 2 clear handprints pressed into the glass. One of them hers, the other slightly larger. Amber was pale as a sheet. She said she felt someone breathing on her neck, but when I shone the light around, there was no one there. We ran out of the room and slept in the living room with all the lights on. The next morning, we both laughed it off, said it was just nerves, shadows, and a trick of the eye. But that's when the weird stuff started happening. Every mirror in the apartment, the bathroom, the hallway, even the microwave door, started fogging up randomly. And every time they did, you could faintly see handprints. Always 2 of them. One day, Amber was doing her makeup before class when she screamed. She said her reflection blinked, but she didn't. That was the last straw. She threw a towel over every mirror in the place and refused to take them down. We finished the semester without mentioning it again, but right before we moved out, we had to take the towels down for the landlord inspection. When Amber pulled the one off the bathroom mirror, she froze. There was something written in the fog. It said, "Thank you for letting me out." I didn't move in with anyone after that. And Amber? She stopped posting selfies completely. Every photo of her since then, if you look closely, her reflection's never quite smiling the same way she is. This happened when I was 12 years old, in a small farming town in Iowa. My dad ran a cornfield maze every October. He'd build it himself, cut the paths, hang little Halloween decorations, set up speakers that played spooky sounds. It was the pride of the whole town, and we made good money from it every Halloween weekend. That year, though, something felt different. The summer had been brutally dry. The corn grew weird, taller than usual, the stalks almost black near the base. The locals joked that the devil must have watered this field himself. My dad just laughed it off. A few nights before Halloween, we were testing the sound system for the maze. I was in charge of walking the paths to make sure every speaker was working. The sun had gone down, and the last light was bleeding out over the horizon when I heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought it was one of the recorded voices, the ones Dad loaded with moans and ghostly laughs. But this was different. It was faint, distant, and I could swear it said my name. Eli. I froze. The nearest speaker wasn't even on. The sound was coming from deeper in the corn. I ran back to tell my dad, but he just said it was probably the wind carrying the sound weird. He even laughed and said, "If the corn's talking to you, tell it to buy a ticket." Halloween came fast, and the maze was packed with people that night. Families, kids, couples sneaking off into corners. But around 9 p.m., one of the guests came out pale and shaking. He said he heard someone crying deep inside, like a little boy calling for help. Dad and a few volunteers went in to check, but they didn't find anyone. Still, people kept reporting strange things. Whispers, giggles, a hand brushing their arm when no one was there. By 10 p.m., half the guests had left. Then one of the speakers near the center of the maze turned itself on. We all heard it. The child's voice crackling through the static, whispering, "Don't leave me here." Dad pulled the plug on the power supply immediately, but the voice kept playing. The generator wasn't even running. The voice just looped over and over. "Don't leave me here. Don't leave me here." It was coming from all the speakers now, echoing through the whole field. Dad yelled for everyone to go home. He and I went in together with flashlights to shut everything down. As we got closer to the center, I swear the whispers started to answer back, overlapping. Too many voices to count. "Don't leave us here. Stay. Stay with us." Then the wind picked up. The corn started swaying like it was alive. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second I saw a shape move between the stalks. Small, child-sized. Dad called out, "Who's there?" But there was no answer. We found the main speaker, ripped the wires out, and the voices finally stopped. Dead silence. We walked back to the truck, and that's when I realized something. The path we came in on wasn't there anymore. Every turn led us deeper. The rows of corn all looked the same, but I could feel something wrong with it. The stalks seemed to close in behind us as we moved. Then, from somewhere behind me, I heard my dad say, "Eli, this way." I turned toward the sound, and there he was, waving his flashlight. But when I turned back toward where I knew my real dad was standing, I saw him still there, staring at me in confusion. And then we both heard it. My own voice, whispering through the corn, "Don't leave me here." We found the way out just after midnight. Dad bulldozed the maze the next day and swore he'd never do it again. They found a shallow grave a week later, an old one, half collapsed, right where the center of the maze had been. Inside were the bones of a child, maybe 10 years old, wearing a tattered Halloween mask. The sheriff said it looked like he'd been buried there decades ago. But the part that still makes my skin crawl, the mask he was wearing, it looked exactly like the one I'd lost when I was 5.